Well, it was quite a start to the new URC campaign, and on tonight's edition of The Left Wing, we'll be talking about wins for Leinster, Ulster and Munster, and what was arguably the performance of the weekend in defeat for Connacht on a weekend where Ireland finished as world's number one on the back of South Africa losing to Argentina. My name is Rúaidhrí O'Connor. I'm delighted to be joined on the line by Luke Fitzgerald. Luke, what a way to start the season.
Yeah, Rhodes, it was a great weekend, wasn't it? Yeah, I think the URC has really turned into I think it's a great competition. I was looking forward to all the games. I think some of the matches, or probably the matches we'll be discussing, were all relatively tight affairs, I think. So, I think it was a good start. A good start for the Irish provinces, I think. Everyone looked pretty impressive, I thought. Most of the attacking play was pretty good. Defensively, there's always going to be teething problems at the start of the season, and there were fairly hard grounds all the matches were played on. So I wasn't too surprised to see some kind of creaky defending and some pretty soft tries. I think you'd be disappointed if they were coming in at the end of the season, but at this juncture, I think not too surprising. So I think they can all be pretty pleased with what the performances that they put out. And I think it bodes very well for the rest of the competition. I thought it was a super start.
Yeah, even across the board, the Dragons coming back and winning late over in Wales, and a weekend that kicked off the tournament and the South Africans weren't even playing because of the Currie Cup, and yet, if you listen to what's going on in England, they're talking about how bad the Premiership was on opening weekend, and it's too early to make any big rash decisions on what we talked about last weekend based on one weekend, but it was just such a positive start for the Irish teams. I mean, starting on Friday night with that Leinster win against Edinburgh, a game that I think last year, I know they picked a very strong backbone of the team, a real spine of the team was very strong with young players kind of interspersed around that. But it was the kind of game that kind of got away from them last year at times, and maybe resulted in the fact that by the end they had to go to South Africa on the road. They were in a bit of a dogfight with Edinburgh, and they found a way. And I know the internationals led the way. Some of the young guys did really well as well. But what did you make of Leinster first impression of this season?
I thought it was a decent first impression. I think, the risk, and I think we'll probably be repeating this, I thought their defence was just a little bit off, I think we'll probably get into that in a bit more depth going on. But, you'd probably expect that at the start of the season. What probably surprised me was that I thought they looked pretty good at times going forward. I thought the shape was a little bit better. I actually thought Prendergast looked very good. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
I was a bit more... I thought he looked like he'd come on a bit. He looks like he's a bit more mature. I thought he ran the game pretty well for the most part and put Leinster in some reasonably good positions. So I thought that was pleasing. I think you're right. I think the kind of big players stood up. Got the obvious ones, Gibson Park with the kind of that was fairly key. And he's such a classy player. It's great for Leinster to have him back. And I think even better that I thought when you think about Ireland during the summer to have done it without him, I think that was kind of reassuring because he'll definitely add something, I think, when we come into the November internationals, provided he stays fit. So yeah, look, I thought there was loads to be positive about. I think it was a good one to Edinburgh, a tough proposition, I think, away from home particularly, and I think on that surface too. So I think they'd be really pleased that they came out on the right side of the result, and I thought there was plenty to be positive about. Plenty to work on. I hate that phrase after matches. It's the one thing, isn't it, that you hear repeated by nearly every professional sportsman. But I really thought this was one of those games. Conceding over 30 points away from home, not the end of the world, but still not great. And they'd be looking to be a bit stingier, I think, going forward.
Talk to me a bit about Prendergast, because we're expecting Leo Cullen to share the load over the next couple of weeks and give all 4-10s probably a bit of a go. Charlie Tector is a 10 who played at 12, which obviously we've discussed a lot with Kieran Frawley, but he was awesome on Friday night. He's now been picked by the Emerging Ireland Tour to cover injuries, so he's gone off with Prendergast, so that neither of them will be with Leinster for a couple of weeks. But the signs are there that Prendergast can have a much bigger role this year. That summer tour, I think, will have brought him on, that experience of being with Ireland for 2 weeks. This Emerging Ireland, let's see, I think he might have been better off being left with Leinster to just play games, because he looks like he's good enough to start. But Ross will get a chance this week probably, or maybe Harry Byrne even. But just Prendergast across that performance, what was it that you liked about him?
I thought he looked calm on the ball, Rods. I think we all know he's a decent ball player, but For a first outing this year, and the team, look, there was experience there. You think of that, 13, 14, 15, 11, all very, very experienced back. So he had probably good information flow into him, which always helps your 10. And then obviously you got Gibson Park inside you as well. So there was pressure off him in that circumstance. But I thought the bit he had to do looked like the shapes were good, looked like he called the ball out the back of those forward plays quite well. And I think, just generally looked calm and looked like a fairly seasoned pro, I think, considering that was the first game out this season. So that was the most reassuring part for me, Rhodes, I think. The one, I still think he'll be tested a bit more at from a defensive standpoint. He still looks a little bit light to me. I wonder, is there another year of kind of building him up? And it might be no harm that he doesn't get much rugby this year, physically, but, obviously mentally, that is the drawback with being at Leinster. You get good coaching, but you just won't get enough game time. And I think while I saw him come on a lot, and I was pleased with that from a, just a Leinster standpoint, an Irish standpoint, his big issue is that he won't get enough game time there at Leinster. So I think the Emerging Ireland is actually that's coming at a perfect time for him. Glad you touched on Tector. That was some try. He took that really well. I mean, that takes huge confidence to throw that dummy at the end to go over. So, he looks like he's one to watch. He looks physically, obviously, I think a bit further on than Prendergast. Looks a little bit chunkier to me. Now, maybe that's just the body shapes. I just don't know if my worry for Prendergast is that's going to be his shape forever. I wonder, does he kind of get a bit injury prone off the back of that? That's kind of why I keep mentioning that about him physically. Plus, I didn't like everything I saw about him from a defensive standpoint last year. So, look, I think that Emerging Ireland tour is actually perfect for those two. And you'd love to see him get 10 in a row, but that's not going to be what happens at Leinster. They have too many 10s. Yeah,
Tector is taking the Kieran Frawley approach to game time. Got moving to 12. He looked. He was the almost a forgotten man in that 10 discussion last year. Like, he is a year older than Sam Prendergast. He was an Ireland under-20s international. He has a good pedigree. He's obviously a very good player. He reminded me to the eye a little bit of David Hawkshaw, actually, a player who
I was just going to mention that.
But I didn't think he was in that mould. But the dynamism he had taking contact, the acceleration into contact, his decision making was very good. His passing was excellent. And is he in a different bracket in terms of, like, he just needs to get on the pitch for Leinster senior team, and if the jersey's not 10, go get the minutes, or do you have the same concerns about a player like him as you would have, like, if he wants to be a 10 down the line, that, like, should he be trying to nail that down, or do you just have to get the minutes when they come at that stage of his career?
Yeah, look, he's going to be struggling for minutes 100%. So he'll have to take what he can get because he needs exposure. You need to feel the speed of playing against, top class professionals. So he needs minutes. There'll come a point where you need to specialise. If you want to play for Ireland, it's unbelievably unusual nowadays that you have kind of a Swiss Army knife that is successful. Your Austin Healey's, these kind of players, your Matt Giddos, they're rarer and rarer, I think. Just everyone's so physically gifted now, and they're kind of nearly, it's almost like, it's not becoming like NFL because there's such an aerobic component to rugby. You just never will get those freaky sizes that kind of just fit in. You can run whatever it is, 40, and you're this weight or you're this height. It just, rugby will get close to that, but it will never get that because you have to be able to run for 80 minutes nonstop, or well, not. You know what I mean? You have to be able to run constantly. So you just never will get these kind of really freakish athletes because you have to be able to run for a long time. So you still, if you want to play international, though, have to specialise. And I think he'll be a little undersized when it comes to playing, international 12s. Be a lovely size, kind of same opinion on Frawley, be a lovely size for a 10 internationally. Provided he's got the skills and the head for it. So at a point, I think, if he wants to get, I'm assuming everyone that plays in the provinces wants to play for Ireland, he'll have to go and play for a province, I think, or try and be competing for a slot at 10 in one of the provinces if he wants to achieve his dream of playing for Ireland, which is, I'm making an assumption, but I don't think it's that far-fetched, is it?
No.
So that's where I think they're all in that situation at Leinster. They've too much quality there, too much quality at 12. For him to really get a look in, because I think Osborne, Keenan, I think might be struggling with a bit of an injury. So I hear at least. Osborne might get more time in that 15 slot than maybe we expected. But I expect him to come in and play some 12 at different points in the season, and then you've got the Geordie Barrett issue coming as well. So. Frawley as well will probably come into that 12 discussion because I just don't think Leinster will play him fully at 10. So he is going to really struggle for game time. I hate to be a downer on what was a really nice start for him in a blue jersey, but he's going to be struggling for game time and probably should be looking elsewhere.
Yeah, well, the one thing I'd say about him is like it's been a while since a Leinster back from the academy came into the team and impressed me that much. Like that he took his chance when it came. So I completely accept what you're saying. But like the Emerging Ireland tour would be good for him, I think, to go and get those get that coaching and stuff. And I think they'll trust him more than some of the other options when it comes to those weekends where the internationals are away. I think he's earned another go at it. It might be a couple of weeks before it happens because the internationals are going to be back drip fed in the next couple of weeks. You mentioned it earlier. Look, I think you're right to kind of give the caveat that it is early this season, but there were defensive flaws in the performance, particularly around that one where Ringrose shoots up and Edinburgh got around them. We have had a full season under Jacques Nienaber this time. It's a different set of circumstances to what it was last year, where Leinster were trying to understand and learn that system on the run. Are we to expect glitches at this time of the year? Would it concern you that they're conceding similar enough tries to ones that maybe they conceded at points last year? Or is it more watch it and see in the next couple of weeks to see if they're kind of adapting to it and learning?
Yeah, like I'm tempted to kind of gut them. I think Ringrose is too good for like he like Ringrose is one of my favorite players, and I think for whatever reason he's been given this kind of free role to just kind of shoot up pretty much all the time, and I just don't like it at all. I'd much rather seeing that kind of just a bit more connected. I think it makes it unbelievably difficult for your winger and your 12 to always be kind of shooting up like that. I think, and that's the perfect scenario. That's if you do have a centre and you have a winger either side of you. You might have a forward inside you at some point, back row or even a front row or a front fiver, on your inside. And to be shooting up like that all the time, it just puts massive pressure on him. I also think, when the collisions happen, he often is he's coming into them kind of out of control. I think he's got a lot of injuries in that. It's a weird point to make, but I think Gary's got an awful lot of injuries the last couple of years because he's so committed and he's coming up so hard, nearly out of control into that space. So I don't love it. I think really good teams will pick you apart there at different points, unless you're brilliant on the inside. Like you have to be so good on the inside, but even on the outside, which is where I assume you're talking about, you saw what happened to them at the end of last season. I just think if you have someone who can make outside 10 in a deep role, that person in that slot for Leinster who's kind of really rushing up seems to get picked apart quite easily, and on fast tracks with, as I said, a really nice ball player in that kind of role just outside 10, lying very deep, has an option for a crossfield kick because the winger's under so much pressure to keep up with Gary in this situation or whoever's the shooter for Leinster. But also if they miss the jump, they leave the 13 very, very exposed. And if you can go over the top with some real pace on the outside, like the South African teams really do in their wingers and fullback, they can really expose you there. And I thought that's what happened towards the end of the season at Leinster, particularly in that semi-final. So, it's an area I'll be watching closely. I think Leinster will, I'm hoping, be assessing that and be open to possibly some change on that, or just doing it better, because one or the other has to happen for me, in my opinion. Because how they finished last season there, it ain't going to fly. Like that's not going to. They'll get picked apart by your Toulouses, and I think La Rochelle's and these kind of teams. I think towards the end of the season, and some of the South African teams on the hard grounds, if that's where they end up.
The weekend to come, they're playing the Dragons at the Aviva on Friday. Like traditionally, this is a game that would never be held at Lansdowne Road. It's an RDS special. It's one of the less glamorous fixtures, but they're playing all their home games at the Aviva this year. Do you think it's going to be a bit of a mental challenge for them, or will they relish the fact that they're playing at this it's a good problem to have, I guess. You're playing at this lovely stadium every week, but it's kind of a place where we go for big occasions, not run-of-the-mill league games. Is that a strange thing, or do you think it's going to bring out good things in them?
Yeah, I assume you're kind of alluding to the kind of Edinburgh Murrayfield type scenario.
A little bit, yeah. Well,
it's a really difficult place to go, yeah.
But they're only open in the lower bowl. Look, they played there during COVID in front of nobody, so it's going to be better than that. They're only open in the lower bowl for these games, so the top tiers won't be full. They've got 15,000 season tickets, I think, or maybe a little bit more. So if even half of them show up, it's not a bad crowd, but it looked very sparse, like an AIL game that played there, maybe a little bit more. But it's just a different thing to look at this year for them, I think. And for players who are used to playing in that stadium when it's full whether it's for Ireland or for a Champions Cup game, I think it's going to be just a quirky little difference for them that they'll have to adjust to. Look, they should beat the Dragons, who had a good win on opening weekend, but Leinster would back themselves on a good pitch to go and beat them. But do you think, like, mentally getting yourself up for that, is that going to be something to kind of deal with? Will players have to think about a little bit?
Yeah, like the first, as I said to you, the first thing I thought of was kind of playing all those matches against Edinburgh. Now, they were some pretty good Edinburgh teams in their defence, but I always felt like we had a better team going over.
Yeah.
And they ran us close or beat us a couple of times. Getting yourself up for those games when you can hear an echo, can be fairly tricky, even if there is 15,000 there. So it could be quiet at times, something they'll have to get used to. You'd imagine over time, though, I think it'll probably work to their advantage versus the other teams coming to the RDS. Like they're coming to play Leinster, and they're probably thinking, well, it'll be a packed RDS. There's a great atmosphere. They're kind of easy games to get up for, I think, for the most time. Even if you're kind of a little bit fearful or nervous about playing Leinster, the support makes it a big game for you too. So even the opposition will have to kind of deal with a few issues on that side themselves. It was always difficult. It wasn't just difficult for Leinster going to play Edinburgh. They were tricky for anyone to play, away from home. And I think Leinster might have that advantage where they get used to it a bit quickly. Now, might have a few ones where it's unusual for them, but I think over time it probably would work to their favour, Roods, if they have a few of these kind of crowds with weird numbers there. And I think the pitch itself, big stadium, generally I think, the wind, probably it's not going to be as exposed as like a sports grounds or something like that. You'd imagine it'll be a little bit calmer. It is a hard surface. It's a fast track. I think that suits Leinster's game. So I think overall it should play to their advantage, even if the atmosphere is a bit weird, possibly at times.
Bit like Rob McBride did media on Monday, and he was saying that Leinster just have too many players and it's a real challenge for them. And I think just like that, it's one of those small violin problems that the other provinces will all be rolling their eyes that we're even talking about it. Speaking of other provinces, Saturday's game between Munster and Connacht, I was down there. One of the hardest games I've ever had to cover, because the lead changed hands 7 times. Every time I looked up, someone was scoring a try. We'll come on to the defence a little bit later because there was some ropey moments on both sides. I referenced it at the start though, I know they lost, but Connacht's performance to me particularly with the ball in hand, was probably the most impressive of any of the teams I watched at the weekend. They produced some unbelievable stuff and came out on the wrong side of the result, which is obviously the most important thing. But with their physicality and with that half-back pairing and some of the set phase moves with that back three with Cordero and Mac Hansen in it, Shane Bolton's a good player as well, throw Bundy Aki into the mix, they look like a team that's going to be worth watching this season, and a team that could do a bit of damage if they get the right kind of ball at the right on the right kind of surface. I don't know if the weather's going to suit them in Galway as it goes on, but what did you make of them? Because I thought some of their stuff they did was brilliant.
Yeah, agreed completely. Very exciting to watch. Impressed with, particularly impressed with Murphy. I thought Ioane looked good too. I think his role would be kind of broader. Like I'm interested to see what his I'd love to see a bit more of his kicking game maybe, and just see what he'd be like over the course of a season. Murphy too, that'll be a big thing with Connacht, because I know we're going to cover the defence later on, but there are going to come points where halfbacks, being steady, taking pressure off the team, the kicking game is going to be very, very important to them. Now, to come back to your point, they were great in the eye. I mean, Murphy, he looked so hungry to get the ball out quickly, didn't he? He reminded me a little bit of Gibson Park, actually. Do you know, he looks hungry in there to get the ball. He's really fighting to get it out quickly all the time. I think Casey does a bit of that too, just really wants to get the game moving. And I thought himself and Ioane looked very, very exciting together. So I think that's a combination to watch. I think Murphy particularly looks like maybe, as I said, want to see more of the kicking game, but everything else, he might push Casey. He might push Casey. He might push Murray. I was really impressed with him. I just thought, as I said, kind of difficult to describe, nearly on a podcast. You'd love just to have literally kind of 10 clips and go, look at him, look at how quick he is getting his hands on that ball. He is really moving bodies, moving legs out of the way. Seems to be able to get his hands on it really, really quick in there. It sounds like a weird thing and it's quite hard to describe. But it's a basic thing, but it's hard sometimes to build in that hunger into a player. So I thought that was great to see. I think he'll get loads of opportunity, or he'll give that backline loads of opportunity to kind of open teams up as the season goes on. The likes of Hansen, great to see him back. He's just so exciting, isn't he? And I think, himself and Cordero, I think, could be, they could be a real challenge to kind of keep quiet over the course of a whole game. So yeah, look, loads of positive stuff with them. Probably similar issues will remain for them. I know we're going to get to that. As to in terms of how their season will go. And you look at the scoreline, which is the real headline, is that, they lost out on another tight one in an interpro at the end of the game. That's going to hurt. And I think that was kind of what happened to them on a number of occasions last year. So they want to come out on the right side of a few of these, because I thought it was almost a bit of a flat tire-y type moment with them at the start of last season, put themselves in a few good positions, and then, some kind of sloppy stuff at the end of the game cost them. And that really does take any momentum that you can kind of get out of some positive things that we saw on the weekend away from you, and makes it difficult to come back, and also it chips away at your belief if you don't win, if you start losing a lot of tight ones. Rhodes, I don't know what did you think about them? Were you
I thought their attack and play was sublime, but some of their defending was really poor, and I think Conor Oliver's tackle on Nankerville summed that up. I mean, both sides were guilty of it at different times. Like Cathal Ford gets over with a straight on carry and scores a try off the back of a line-out maul. Like it was either line-out maul or scrum, but it was a scrum, but it was like that doesn't happen. Like, first phase, both teams were guilty of really soft concessions, and that probably puts a little bit of a caveat on what we're looking at in attack, because it won't be that easy as the season goes on. I thought Josh Murphy was excellent on his return after a year and
very
out of the
strong
game.
in the hit, wasn't he?
Like, I think
a few brilliant hits, some great carries too. That was what I was surprised. I thought some of his carrying was really good, some of his lines of running. So I wonder, has there been, maybe the coaching, maybe over the summer, maybe they've had a rethink about how they're going to go forward. Did you think that? I thought
I've always liked him
on the carry.
I've always liked him.
I like him too, but I hadn't seen the carrying, Ruds.
Yeah,
I hadn't seen that carrying.
He has such size. Leinster liked him. I mean, he's one of these players. I think himself and David Humphreys will just have to put himself and Ben Murphy up in lights as players who look what happens when you do go, because you get the opportunity and you get a chance to shine. Because Ben Murphy's been kicking his heels at Leinster the last couple of years, in 1 week, off the AAL for a few weeks, and no rhythm. And apparently he had a brilliant pre-season with Connacht, who had a longer pre-season than Munster, played an extra game. I think Munster's sense was maybe that Connacht were just more ready for the game than they were, that Munster have decided that in the long term a big pre-season wasn't what they needed, that they would kind of ease their way into the season a little bit and get the rewards at the end. And I think Connacht were hoping that would pay and they would get the result, and they came so close to it. But yeah, what was good, I think, was that neither Cian Prendergast or Pete Wilkins after the game were patting each other on the back and saying, look, we were brilliant today and we got 2 points. Cian Prendergast was properly annoyed that they let it slip, and that's a good sign. They played the Sharks at home on Saturday night in the Dexcom Stadium. That's a big game for them. I think all their home games are big. The fact they have a weird home stadium situation this year with half the stadium knocked down. How they bounce back and whether they can kind of marry the brilliant attacking play and mirror the pace that they're playing at with grinding out the result at the end is big for them, because they're not going to get into that position at Thomond Park too often. They had Munster where they wanted them and let them slip. And Munster should be praised, I think, for the way they came back into it. They were really sloppy in the first half. I know everyone's losing their mind about the fact that it was 10 tries in the game. Quality-wise, there were times where it was pretty poor. Connacht probably hit the ground running much better, but Munster found a way, which, I thought Coombs' second half was really good for them. Their bench was good. And they found a way, Munster, when they weren't playing well, which is probably the thing that Connacht didn't have. Connacht played well and couldn't find a way.
Yeah, it was interesting. What did you make of Cian Prendergast? I actually liked him. I thought he had a few decent interactions with the referee. I thought he was quite good on the... Now, it was a yellow card. I think they were lucky enough to hit on Casey at the start of the match. But I just liked, he just, for a guy, now he was maybe a little aggressive for my liking, but I just he was a guy that was certainly thinking about it. He talked about kind of 2 mitigating factors in there. Just kind of good, I thought, intelligent dialogue with the referee. Now, it sounds like a weird point to make, but I know he's kind of new in the role there, so I was kind of watching that. I thought he looked decent as well. So I'm kind of watching him go forward. But yeah, look, there's plenty to be positive for Connacht about. They do need to get a couple of wins. That's going to be key for them. I think that's what they didn't get at this time last year, having had a couple of periods and a couple of games where they were actually quite good, and then just let things fall away, and then things kind of snowballed. And I just thought defensively, whatever happened, they never got the belief, or whatever happened with the thinking around defense. They just didn't look like a tight-knit unit, even, which I think is probably the most basic thing you want to get out of your defense, isn't it? Is that at least you all look like you're doing the same thing and you have belief and you're kind of backing each other up. And there was points where they just kind of fell apart in big games. And yeah, that's going to be the key thing for me this year for them. You can see that they're going to be able to break teams down and get some tries, I think, pretty much against everyone, it looks like. But, I was kind of hoping they'd get off to a better start defensively. But certainly work to do there. They were looked. They had a few soft ones, few really soft ones went through, and even some of the line breaks that they kind of got away with at times. Those stuff you're like, they need to fix that quick. Particularly off the back of last year.
What about Munster?
Yeah, Munster were good, I think, didn't you? Like, I thought, sloppy tries, sloppy defensively. But as I said, start of the year, and I think the same applies to Connacht, by the way. I was just kind of watching that more closely with Connacht because they had such issues there last year. But Munster were sloppy there too. I think I give all the teams just a little bit of wiggle room on that because it's the start of the season. And I think they were hard grounds too. You kind of discount that factor, but it does mean if someone makes a break, I mean, you look at the Hawkshaw break, like he's quick. But I think on a softer pitch around Christmas, he probably doesn't get home there, I don't think. Sorry, super finish, by the way. But yeah, like Munster, I think will get better defensively. I heard a lot of people say they thought Burns played well. I don't know. I think he's only okay. I know he got some kind of rave reviews during preseason, but a little bit unsure of him still. Crowley's a big player for them, isn't he? Like, obviously for, that's probably stating the obvious at this stage, but, he makes a massive difference there. I actually thought Farrell was decent. A few lovely touches. The pass over the kind of shoulder was gorgeous, wasn't it? For, oh God, it's escaped me now who he passed it inside to, but he had some lovely touches, I thought, in attack, and that was kind of good to see. So I wonder, will he, at a bigger team with possibly, kind of more consistent pack, probably on top more regularly in games, will we see a bit more from him, and will he come out of his shell? So watching him kind of closely, I thought defensively he was poor last year for Connacht at times, some of the games I watched. So watching him closely there for Munster, but in attack, will we see him flourish a bit more? Big fan of Nankerville. So will he develop a partnership there? Watching that one closely enough. Reasonably impressed with Munster. I think the same things. They look like a team with heart. They play for each other. There's a lot of changes there, isn't there? And, how those things bed down over the course of the season, Roods, is probably pretty important. I'm not ready to make a call on them. They'll be difficult to beat at home. They're a team that'll play for each other, as you can see from the result on the weekend. And it's probably away from home, how they do there without kind of some of the kind of key guys from last year. I don't know. Is any of that kind of resonating with you? Do you feel the same way, or no? Am I?
Yeah, no. I think they were scratchy in the first half. I thought there was a load of times where Casey would throw a ball and people didn't seem to be where he expected them to be, and they just looked a little bit disjointed. That it almost looked like they had a bad pre-season in terms of the matches they played. They lost to Bath and lost heavily to Gloucester, and the bits I saw of those games, they looked really off it, not nearly at the level you need to be at the start of the season. And I thought that bled into their first half at times, but I was impressed with how they were able to turn it on when they did turn it on. Having Klein back is important. He was probably a little bit rusty on the day, but he gives them so much in that tight five. I think Dermot Barron's a big player for them as well. I agree with John Farrell. Thought he was really excellent, and like he's an underrated. It's quite it's a common thing to say about him. Like Joe had him in the Ireland squad at one stage. He rated him highly. I think he got a broken run in terms of injuries. Kind of came at bad times for him with Connacht, but he was released by Connacht, and I don't know where he was going to end up. And Munster have gone in once Frisch was gone, and they've picked him up, and was he
released?
As far as
I just thought Munster came in from.
No, I believe they came in for Kilgallen.
Oh, you're the man, and you know more about that.
I think so. I could be wrong on that, but yeah, no, he was a free agent, I think. But they picked him up, and he looks like he's gonna get a real second wind in his career there. He looked really, really sharp. I've always liked him as a player. I think I agree with you on last season, but I wonder if the contract stuff maybe played into that a little bit. But they need to get Abraham's hands on the ball a little bit more. Like on a day like that, to only get him like a couple of touches was poor. But there's potential there, and to get the win, get 5 points when you have all those issues in the first half, I think is a good solid start. They go to Zebre this weekend. You know, whether they bring back Crowley a week early or whether they stick with Tony Butler, like Rowntree was fairly, honest about where Butler is defensively. He obviously kicked 2 brilliant conversions to win the game, but they ran through him for one of the tries. I think that call for try was on him, so they know that he's not quite there yet on his defence. But he's obviously able to kick a ball over the bar pretty well from all angles, and they do rate him. So they've got work to do. They'll get internationals back weeks 2, week 3, and they'll get stronger as they go. They're less affected by the emerging Ireland than Ulster and Connacht, who I think have reasons to have grievances with the IRFU because they're losing some serious players in the next couple of weeks. Ulster will
really, you just decimate Leinster with that. That was what my thinking was, that you just, like, Leinster have as they've said themselves, have too many.
Yeah.
Now they also have guys coming back late, but I feel like I agree with them. I think they can have some, there's something to that. I think they're justified in having some kind of feeling a bit aggrieved by the developing Ireland tour and how it impacts their squad. A kind of important parts of the season for teams that are not like. When you're playing against teams that may not have international playing against you, these are kind of important weeks for those two teams, I think.
Especially like Richie Murphy's trying to get some momentum into his season, and the clock goes red. It's not looking like a great start. They managed to pull it out of the bag, which is I think I said it last week. I think that is a huge moment in their season. To beat Glasgow on your opening night when you have to go to South Africa for 2 weeks now without Harry Sheridan and Cormac Izuchukwu, who were brilliant off the bench, like 2 really serious players, plus a couple of others who were going off at the Emerging Ireland tour. Like, it's obviously very early in Richie Murphy's reign. It's very early in the season. No one was going to be overly critical, but you could easily get into a bad spiral if you lose your first game of the season like that with the schedule Ulster have. Dave Shanahan's try, so important, and for Ulster to win it that way was just huge for them.
Yeah, God, what a lift! As you said, that could have been it would have been a bit deflating, I think, or very deflating if they had kind of lost that one. Maybe they should have. I don't know. But look, I think they'll get massive belief from that, and you could see what it meant to the guys on the try line at the end, couldn't you? Like, you could see, hopefully they're a tight-knit unit, and hopefully kind of, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I'd love to see Richie do well. I'd love to see a coach that's kind of come through the avenue he's come and be successful in a place that I think has really struggled for the last kind of 10 years, really, hasn't it? It's a place that's been flatter to the sea for quite a long period of time. Probably 10 is probably generous. It's probably more like 15, isn't it, really? So, it's a brilliant setup up there. It should be competing with the powers of, I think, some of the kind of superpowers of European rugby. I think Ulster should when I just think of traditionally what they've been and what kind of force they've been and the players that they've produced, it's been a bit sad to see where they are at the moment. I really hope that they can turn things around, and I hope Richie's the one to do that. I'd love to see a coach who's come up through the Irish system and who's been brilliant. Let's face it, the results for the 20s have been outstanding the last 4 or 5 years. I'd love to see that transfer across. I think it'd be great to see a pathway for other Irish coaches. And he's very astute, like really, really astute. He's a rugby guy, and had a pretty good career himself. So great to see. I think, as you said, going into what is it going to be a tough couple of weeks, off the back of a win makes, I think, a big difference. I think it really colours your week very differently, because he can kind of, do you know what it does? It gives him an opportunity to hoe into the lads about the mistakes they made, but still he can go, look, and we still won. That kind of way. So there is so much more for us. So you get a lot of belief from those kind of weeks, I think. And, if they can nick a win over the next couple of weeks, I think they'll be feeling really, really good about themselves. But, Izuchukwu going, I think I'm a huge fan. I think he's got if he could stay injury free, that guy has a big career ahead of him, I think. Certainly for Ulster, and I think probably for Ireland, because he's the size, isn't it? And he's a nice player. He looks comfortable in the wide channels too, but he's so physical. And he'll give them something a little bit different, a little bit similar, I think. Has a similar-ish style of running to a young Ian Henderson. I don't know if you kind of noticed that. Nearly kind of Like you can see he can move quickly, moves really well, but he's kind of still heavy on the foot. He just looks like a big heavy man, but he moves very, very well. So really excited to see, if he can be that talisman and you can build around him for the next kind of 10 years. So I think it's a shame they're losing him. I don't really see what he gets out of going on that trip, if I'm being completely honest. I think he would get more from staying with Ulster. So that's one I don't get, and I think it'll hurt Ulster. So I'm not happy. I'm not unbelievably happy about that one. Yeah.
I think it's for him and maybe Prendergast are the two that are going to South Africa with the cap in mind, that this is their launch pad. Having been to South Africa on the senior tour during the summer, they get 2 more weeks working under Paul O'Connell in Izuchukwu's case, and Andrew Goodman in Prendergast's case. They come back, they play a couple of provincial games, and then they come into the November squad. And against Fiji, I'd be surprised if both of them aren't involved in that match day squad. I think Farrell really rates Prendergast, and I think they really like what Izuchukwu has to offer. He went on the last one, he got a pretty serious injury quite soon afterwards, so he lost a lot of time there. But I think you're right. Like, I think Sheridan is a quality player. Really good off the bench the other night, really physical. Great attitude. I think he's going to be an important player for Ulster this year. Dave McCann is not going on this tour. I think he's becoming a very important player for them as well. He became an important player for them last year. Kind of homegrown future captain material who they can build their pack around a little bit as well. So I'd say that he went on the last Emerging Ireland tour. He could have gone on this one, I'm sure, but they couldn't take everyone, and I think there was a bit of bartering around it. But I know, like, Connacht losing Sean Jansen, who came off the bench, is an important player for them, and they were supposed to lose Shane Bolton, who's a starter. Even I thought Tom Clarkson was really good for Leinster on Friday night. He's a player that really could have done with starting again this weekend and kind of getting a bit of rhythm, because he looks like he's put on size. He looks like he was. He impressed me on Friday night as well. But the RFU and their infinite wisdom have put this on. And look, the players who've gone on these tours before, they will say that they got something out of it. And the provincial coaches, Richie was the only one who said it was an inconvenience, but the other provincial coaches are all towing the party line. They're saying the right things about it. And they kind of, I guess what it will do is give opportunities to other players. But it's not ideal when you have to go to South Africa yourself and play 2 games in the league when you're just trying to build some momentum.
But the Izuchukwu one will really hurt Richie,
Yeah, no, definitely.
That really hurts him, I think. Like, and like, he need that pack really needs someone like him. I think he like, I thought him going off against Leinster last year was nearly like the turning point in the game. Like, he got off to an absolute flyer in that game against, what I think is I think we can all accept, even though Leinster haven't won anything in a while. Like, it's still probably the best. It's probably the best team in the league, really, on paper, certainly. So, I don't know. I think he'd have been, like, even for his chances of getting into, like, if he'd had a brilliant start to the season, is there a chance that he kind of pushes for that kind of 6 slot? I mean, I wouldn't rule that out. Like, I think he's brilliant. Like, he's obviously huge for the line out. He's built for international rugby. He's got the pace for it. I would have thought playing at Ulster would have been more beneficial for him and pushes him further towards, starting a match, possibly maybe starting an Australia match. Because I was going to say the Argentina match, but I don't think after the way that the competition has gone down south, you could probably go with you could say Argentina is the one you might start, someone who's kind of on the cusp. You might say Fiji is the obvious one, but no, Argentina for me now is going to be a big match, I think, and it looks like Australia is the one where you might say maybe Izuchukwu or someone like that gets a look in there. So yeah, look, it's an interesting one. I think Richie's right to feel aggrieved. I actually feel Izuchukwu would be better served playing for Ulster, as I think probably the same thing with probably the same with Prendergast to a certain degree. Sheridan certainly, I think, would be better off staying with Ulster as well. So it's a tricky one. I like the idea of the Emerging Ireland, but I think there's a few people that are probably emerged and maybe might be better served by playing in their provinces, and I think that might get them closer to actually pushing for the Irish team, which I think is what we're really trying to get out of this, isn't it? We're trying to find future internationals here, but some of these guys are a little bit closer than next season or the season after, is probably the point I'm making in a very roundabout way.
That squad is gathering in Dublin tomorrow or tonight, I believe, and they're heading off on Saturday, games on Wednesday, before they come back, and the picture will have shifted. Even like people will have stepped into their jerseys and had opportunities while they're away, and that might be uncomfortable for them as well. It would be remiss of me, Luke, not to ask you about your former teammate Marty Moore. Like Ulster a bit light on props, and his decision to retire has left him even lighter. Retiring from the professional rugby on medical advice to prioritise his mental well-being. A player you played with for Ireland, for Leinster. You won. I think he played 10 times for Ireland, and all 10 were in the Six Nations, and he won the Six Nations in both campaigns. So a good innings. That move to Wasps probably ended his Ireland career. He got close. He played for Ireland A 2 years ago against the New Zealand select, but he never really got back in under Andy Farrell. But a good innings from Marty Moore. Like, if that's his decision, you got to respect it, and respect the reasons behind it as well.
Yeah, look, to be honest with you, I'm not in touch with Marty. Lovely chap, very good player, lovely skills, kind of underrated part of his game. Was a great tackler, obviously a great poacher. He's a good shape for a poacher. Brad Thorne used to, when he came over, sung his praises. Thought he was an excellent prop. So, look, I think the Wasp move, probably did precipitate the kind of end of his international career, really. And he kind of got some he kind of a bit of an injury interrupted kind of time at Ulster, so didn't really get to show his full wares, I think, up there. And plus, it's been a challenging period up there, but. Yeah, he'll be a loss, I'm sure. He's a good guy to have around the camp. He's a very good player. He can be very proud of his career. And look, if it's what he needs to do, to step away for whatever the health reasons are behind that, I think then he's obviously right to go and do that and get on with the next phase of his life. So we wish him all the best. I think I'm sure I'm echoing your sentiments as well. It's a tricky transition, but I'm sure he'll be well able to manage that. So we wish him all the best, yeah.
You touched on earlier on, the big news of the weekend for the South Africans who are still tuning in to watch us is that Ireland are back on top of the world rankings after the Boks lost to Argentina on Saturday. I know the Argentinians love it when Irish people talk about world rankings points. The Rugby Championship in general, like it's winding down to a close. There's still 3 teams can win it at the end of the weekend. Obviously the Lions thing is the big thing we're kind of all watching it through the prism of. The Australia struggling, but kind of gave a bit of to show there was a bit of life left in them, coming back from well behind against New Zealand on the weekend. Are you starting to see signs that Joe was getting a tune out of these Australian players? Are you worried about the Lions tour next year, or what have you made of it?
I am a little bit worried about the Lions tour next year. I think Australian rugby's been on the back foot for such a long time, Rhodes. And they really are struggling for eyeballs. It's been a fairly it's I wouldn't say it's probably been a bit of a slow death to a certain extent. And you had a few kind of periods where they get to a World Cup final, things like that. But I don't think it's really representative of what's going on behind the scenes there, and the challenges that the local teams are, from a Super Rugby perspective. There's kind of teams folding up there. So I don't know. It's certainly difficult. There's less people playing there. They're competing in a very, very competitive marketplace there, with Aussie rules obviously being the main competitor, but also rugby league being very, very popular in certain parts of the country too. So they're really struggling, I think, to get the same kind of, like Australia always had like unbelievably talented kind of groups of players. I also think coaching wise, they always seem to be ahead. Just you think historically, your Bob Dwyers and these kind of people always seem to be a little bit ahead in terms of their thinking on the game. That seems to have shifted more towards New Zealand and probably South Africa more recently, maybe Ireland too. You could probably argue. You think of all the coaches who've come through Ireland. You think of Rassie, you think of Joe, kind of obviously. You think of Andy Farrell. Obviously now, there's lots of quality coming through Ireland, and some of the thinking, the foremost thinkers seem to be spending time here on their trips around to where they end up. Something to that, but Australia doesn't seem to be that destination, and Joe seems to be coming in to try and fix what I think has been a downward trend for a long period of time. So can he fix it? Remains to be seen. I think maybe even for him, too big a challenge possibly. But what I think he can do is get them structured and playing for them, playing for each other, playing a brand of rugby that I think will be fairly pragmatic. And, hopefully, just not having what we saw a couple of weeks ago against Argentina, unfold. Like, that was pretty embarrassing. So, good to see a little bit of fight in them. But I think it's more, if you're asking me on balance, I think I'd be more worried about next year than not. I think if the Lions can get cohesive and get organized fairly quickly and have a fairly simple game plan, I think they'll have far too much firepower for these Aussies. So, yeah, a bit concerned for the what kind of product we'll be putting out next year.
No, I do agree because, like, it's hard. Certainly at half time on Saturday, you could not agree with that worry, that fear that the Lions tour is going to be a bit of a write-off. I'm planning on going out there to cover it, and you want it to be a major event. 2017 and 2009, the tours I've covered are two of the best things I've ever been involved in, I've ever been ever attended. So they're special things, and I know it's easy to get dismissive of them when you're back here and you're listening to Sky overhyping them a little bit, but when you're in the middle of them, they are incredible, as you know from being involved. So they should be the ultimate challenge, and at the moment Australia are not the ultimate challenge. Where I can see Joe's influence is in those kind of set plays. They unlocked New Zealand's defence through his mind, almost like the stuff that he gave them, it worked, and they'll buy into that because they can see it happen. And it reminded me a little bit of those days back under Eddie O'Sullivan, where Ireland would be miles behind against France at half time and then launch this unbelievable comeback and almost get there over in the Stade de France against France in the Six Nations. It happened a couple of times in the 2000s. I wasn't sure if I ever really believed that they were going to get there, but it will give them belief that they got close. To go back to your point about coaches, like, the mad thing is that the 3 of the 4 rugby championship coaches all coached in Ireland. Razzie had his year and a bit in Munster. Felipe obviously has huge links with Leinster, and obviously Joe as well. Like, Felipe's doing some job there. Like, you're right to put Argentina right up there. I mean, I'd nearly put Fiji ahead of Australia at this stage. Like, Fiji are they may even be ranked higher than Australia, but Argentina are becoming a pretty serious proposition. That 2 weeks at the start of November is looking fairly tricky for Ireland. Felipe, like, did you know Felipe was going to be a good coach?
Yeah, I did. I didn't know he was going to do that. I'm pretty sure he went back to be a doctor originally. But so I thought he'd be good at anything he tries. Like, he's one of those guys, super intelligent. When you actually, he can be quite fiery on the pitch. But that's because he's just a born winner. He's a guy who wants to win at everything. He's one of my favorite players I ever played with. He was one of the most enjoyable to play alongside. He'd be kind of trying things, but he really kind of believed himself, backed himself fully, I think. And as I said, very, very bright guy, clearly, So I think he's a guy who'll get it right. He's been to all the right places. I think he's coached alongside some brilliant coaches. So you'd have to think the learnings all along the way. And he's coaching different countries too. I think that seems to be kind of an important thing in a coaching career. Is that gone? You've got to think in different places. You've kind of developed your own ideas about how you should want to play the game in different places. And I think it also gives you insight into how different countries think. So I think from an international coaching perspective, actually quite important to be able to do that and say, well, look, these guys will think this way in this part of the pitch or whatever it is. And that kind of intimately, and that gives you an opportunity to kind of pick teams apart in different ways. It's not just looking at a camera and saying, oh, this is what they're doing, like a chessboard. That's important. Joe can obviously do that brilliantly well, but he also has insight into how you're trying to how they're trying to break you down, and maybe where you'll be able to break the other guys down, because they'll be thinking this way in as I said, in different scenarios. So I think it's good that he's done that. I think I'm not surprised to see it just based on the personality himself. Yeah, it's great to see. Like, we need there was a period there where you're kind of thinking, you're a little bit worried about Southern Hemisphere rugby, I think, and Argentina emerging to be a real contender and take some serious scalps this year is brilliant for world rugby, I think, for the whole product. So that's great to see. Yeah, look, I think just to come back on the Joe thing, it'll be important for the Aussies to have patience with him, which is very difficult. They're really competitive at nearly everything they do. They all, they punch above their weight nearly in every sport, don't they? Considering that their biggest sport is the one that they only compete internally on, really, with a few Irish people, coming over to play here and there as well, at all the other ones. It's a real testament to what they are as a sporting nation. So that'll be the big challenge, I think, for Joe. I think not getting too caught up in the set pieces as well. Like, it's so nice to have, but I think towards the end of his time in Ireland, I think maybe he moved a little bit away from, where I think the game has gone, which is being able to prize teams apart in open play and being pretty stingy. I thought he did an unbelievable job with the All Blacks defence at the World Cup in Ireland, based on the principles that he would have used with our defence in Leinster and Ireland. It wasn't this like South African one where you're really pressing very high. It was. They did a bit of that. They were aggressive, but they were also contained. Ireland particularly well. I think, implementing that style there, but also, ball in hand, long phases of play, 10, 15, 20 phases of play. Can he develop that part of Australia's game as well? Not just the set plays. You can't just rely on that anymore, Rhodes. I think your product has got to be a bit broader than just being, a set play type team and a very pragmatic team. So I think he's well capable of doing it. I think he might be the best coach in the world still, just in terms of thinking. Andy Farrell, probably the closest in my opinion, at this juncture. But if anyone can get it right, it's Joe. He's such a good thinker. And he all of his teams, I think it's fair to say, I think, you'd be able to see that even from not having been in any of the changing rooms, Ruds, just your kind of trained eye on it. They generally are very cohesive and are very clear about what they want to be doing on the pitch. So it's just where he directs his focus will be the important thing for him, if you ask me personally.
I think it's a topic we'll be returning to across the season because it's such a big one to watch across it. But we'll see how the Rugby Championship finishes this weekend. We'll also see if the URC can keep up those entertainment levels. But for tonight, that's all we got time for. My thanks to Luke and all the production team, and we'll see you all again next week.